Hello everyone, this is Chris Legacy. We are rerunning a few videos. That's where we would get copyright problems. You know how it is. Sometimes months later after the video comes out, someone suddenly claims there's a copyright infringement, and we've learned the hard way. It's not even worth our time to actually argue about it. I mean, these people would even claim copyright on something like the last post, which has only been played since the 1800s at military funerals as well as at military bases across the world. But you know, some people, that's how they make their money. Let me not be sarcastic. So what we do now is we simply remove those things and we rebroadcast the episode. So what you're seeing here, you've probably seen before, but it's still a very good video, and so it's worth your while to watch it again. So that's what's happening here. So without further ado, let us carry on with the original video, minus whatever bothered YouTube so much. Thank you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Hello Internet. I have to tell you that we are greatly privileged today. We have André E Olivier here, and by the time that you finish with this episode and quite a few to come, you will know André E Olivier. And I'm honored and privileged to tell you that I know the man. We've worked together in Nigeria, made a huge impression on me. I later found out I was on the same parade as him. He was a captain, I was a student constable. I can't even remember seeing him, and I doubt if he saw me. But that's how life is, it's small, and that's what Legacy does. You know, we bring people together, and we're going to talk about his life, because he was a task force officer. In other words, the special forces of the police. He was an officer there. Those of you who really listened would have known that James Teitge and Frans Fourie talked about him. They spoke about him at their trip to Israel, where they were doing some training. I'm sure the Colonel will tell us about that. Sir, you are most welcome with us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you. And now it's over to you. We're going to ask you, how did this start for you? How did you end up in the Railway Police? Became a Special Task Force member? You had fun and games all over Africa, all over the world actually. I know a few things of you. And then of course, when the Railway Police were reincorporated into the South African Police Force, that's a parade where I was, and he was himself. You just moved on and you became a senior officer in the, now it's called the Police Special Task Force. But you will explain all these things to us. So thank you, and it's over to you.
Yeah. Wow, Chris, yes, thank you very much. I mean, we worked together up in Africa at one point in time, and for 13 years we lost contact. And what a wonderful phone call it was a couple of days ago when you called me out of Bloemfontein, and we could get together and this evening and have a bite to eat, and now we can sit and chat a little bit. Yes, where did it all start? It started many, many years ago, actually in East London as a matter of fact. And I think also there we have some common ground in East London. And my father, he was in the Navy in the Second World War. He was actually a farmer in Hubertina, Langkloof area. He joined the Navy. He was on a minesweeper called the East London in the Mediterranean Sea. And after the Second World War, He came back to the farm. There was depression, so he joined the railways. He worked for the South African Railways. And obviously he's Afrikaans speaking. I'm also Afrikaans speaking, but I prefer to do this in English because there's an international audience I think that we need to reach as well. Because we are brothers all over the world. If you wore a uniform, you were in the military or paramilitary, that's been my experience all over the world, where I've touched base with different police forces and so on. So my mother was English speaking. And she met my father, they got together, and there were 6 children born out of that marriage. I was the second eldest, and maybe at a later stage when we get to the book that I wrote, all my brothers and sisters are dead, some of them at a very young age. It was quite tragic. My father died when I was in standard 3. My mother had cancer, and so on. And all of that eventually led me to the Lord. But at that point in time, wow, I tell you, I thought this God was just one big angry God. So I was, as a youngster, I was quite an angry young man as well. So where a better place? Join the police. Now I had to do a spin up. Do I join the railway police or do I join the South African police? And my father had died in standard 3. So I knew he was in the railways, and I knew that the pension and the salaries was pretty good. So to me, I said, let me join the railway police. And I must be very, very honest with you. I have served in the South African railway police. I've served in the South African police. And I also served a stint in the Ciskei police, where I trained their task force. And I found joy in all of the police forces because I was, in my essence, I was a policeman. Always have been, and even now I've been out for many, many years. I still work with the police on a daily basis as the managing director, where I am now working with armored vehicles and so on. So my mom and dad got together. I thought because my dad was on the roads, I joined the railway police. So I came up to Johannesburg, empty suitcases, was sworn in, got all the uniforms, all of the brass buttons and so on, and into the suitcases and down to East London. And my first posting was in East London Harbour. And I will never ever forget, it's many years ago, when I walked into that charge office at East London Harbour, there was an old sergeant, Sergeant Bert Klaasen. He took a book called Wenke in verband met die ondersoek van misdaad. He threw it across the table and he said, Roof, we gaan leer. And I started to learn from that day. With the sergeant exam, if I can remember correctly, I was the youngest sergeant in the railway police at that stage, and I passed with the highest marks because what he did, the enthusiasm that he had for a first day policeman, it was just unbelievable. And it was that father figures that I can, even to this day, can remember through my whole police career that was there for me. So I joined the police, railway police in East London. I came up to the police college, and I did 6 months at Eston Park, which is the railway police college outside of Kempton Park. And the beauty about that college, it was built by Italian prisoners of war, also veterans and so on. You go to some of the prison services here, you'll find the Italian graves. As a matter of fact, quite recently we did the poppy parade at the graveyard in Rebecca Street. There are German graves where we put poppies on the graves. So even up until this day, over many, many years, the veterans and police have always been part of my life, and even now. So when I joined the police, I always wanted to do my best, and I gave my best because it was a passion. It's something that I wanted to do. The first sergeant exam that came up, I did the sergeant exam, and I passed quite good. And quite shortly after that, there was a detective course. I joined the detectives, and I was transferred to the then Transkei. So I worked the Mthatha area, Bikkie, Munyu, Vigisville, Ngobo, Coffee Bay, Dagga. We had so many car chases in terms of Dagga. We had roadblocks by the Kai River and so on. I can tell you stories for the next couple of hours as far as that is concerned. And what actually happened there was the Transkei police was then formed, and we were just 3 sergeants, 1 in Butterworth and 2 up in Mthatha, that would help the Transkei police. And just as a matter of interest, there was a very strange thing that was happening in the Ngobo area. There was a lot of housebreaking taking place, and the modus operandi was always the same. And when we picked up some fingerprints at one of the sites, we saw that this guy should actually be in prison. And when we checked, he was actually withdrawn to a police station for further investigation. And what was happening, the Transkei police were actually releasing him at night to do the burglaries and then lock him up again in the morning. So after that talk to this guy, they issued a warrant for my arrest for assault or something along those lines, and I had to head to the border and I didn't go back over the Ciskei border. So that ended my short stint in the Ciskei, just in passing. Then there was a post in King Williamstown on the mobile unit, and the mobile unit worked from King Williamstown all the way up to Alleville North and all of those areas. Now what I remember from that Hogsback area and so on was so cold that as policemen we actually wore pantyhose because it was so cold. And it was quite fun, but we didn't want anybody to know we are wearing pantyhose. But we didn't have any heaters or aircons in the police vans in those days. The Chef El Caminos and the Ford F-150s and 100s and so on. So I worked that area in King Williamstown. Then there was a call for instructor in the Railway Police College at Esland Park. Now that's another story that I just need to tell you quickly. When I was a youngster, I started to box. Now in East London, there was the BABA, Border Amateur Boxing Association. And I used to box at the Railway Club, Turnbull Park. And used to box against these stevedores working on the tugs. They looked like Popeye the Sailor Man with big, and they would knock the hell out of you, really. And then you played rugby for the bobbies, for the police, although I was in the railway police. And there you under 20s, but you playing against the 13 man. I tell you, you had to get tough. So after the boxing, I started then my self-defense career. I did jiu-jitsu, and I graded right up to black belt 3rd Dan. So because of the death of my brothers and sisters and so on, I was a very angry young man, so I used to fight quite a lot. And what happened was there was a post in the Railway Police College for the first full-time self-defense instructor. So before that, the PTI used to give a little basic self-defense. So in 1977, I went up to the police college. I think we were about 4 or 5 people that applied for the job as a self-defense instructor, and we were in the gym, and we knocked the daylights out of each other. And I got the job. I was the first full-time self-defense instructor in Esland Park, and I spent a couple of years there. And for some other reason, at that point in time, there was not a warrant officer exam. So I said to myself, the first warrant officer exam that's going to take place, I'm going to write that warrant officer exam, because not just the promotion, but the money, you need a little bit more money. At that stage I was married, I had a couple of kids, and so on. And when the exam came, I wrote the exam. And I passed again, very, very well. I think like 4th or 5th in the Republic. So I did well. So then I was transferred as a warrant officer out of the police college to the old Jan Smuts Airport, or OR Tambo as they call it today. And there I worked on the shift. And maybe just one funny little thing that happened there. They were boarding the technical side of the airport. And at that stage you had the railway police and the South African police working on the airports. The South African police would do more the terminals, and the railway police would do more the technical area where South African Airways was, which was part of the Department of Transport. So there was big construction going on, and they had like at one of the construction sites, and remember airports are a national key point. So at one of the sites where they were boarding, they put a place where a policeman was on duty to make sure that nobody could go in. Now, as a warrant officer in charge of the shift, I took the police car to go and visit the different sites to see that people weren't sleeping, and I found the police constable sleeping on the other side. But there was a ditch, I couldn't get to him. So what I did is I picked up a rock, and I wanted to throw against the zinc, but I threw him skoon onder sy cap uit. And there he hit the ground. So I jumped into the van and I drove away. So about an hour later, I went back and I said to him, because he was bleeding, I said, what happened? He said, Warren, there were 3 of them. So I said, okay, I'm saved on this one. And, we could get the necessary attention, and I had him relieved by another policeman and so on. And many of these experiences over the years. And then the lieutenant exam came up, and I actually said to the inspectorate, they must try and fail me if they can. I was so windgat. I said, I'm going to write this exam and I'm going to pass it. And I participated in that lieutenant exam, and I passed extremely well. And in end of 1980, I was commissioned by the state president as a lieutenant in the South African Railway Police. It's the same commission signed by the same state president as in the army or in the South African Police Service. Because as a commissioned officer, you are commissioned by the state president. And then what happened was, in South Africa, in other parts of the world as well, as a matter of fact, in the late 70s, terrorism internationally started to change more from the rural to the urban. And aircraft hijacks started to take place. You'll remember the Akeli Laro, the boat that was hijacked. Trains were being hijacked, buses were being hijacked, and no special forces in the world had the ability to deal with that, because everything was coin-orientated, counterinsurgency, rural areas, and so on. Now, we all had that training. That wasn't a problem. And you will recall the Baader-Meinhof group, you'll recall what happened in Germany, what happened up in Africa when the Lufthansa aircraft was hijacked and so on. So all around the world, special forces had to start developing tactics for urban terrorism, specifically like aircraft hijacks and so on, because the first couple of aircraft hijacks, they didn't know how to handle these things. So in 1979, the government of South Africa, the parliament got together. It was the old Staatsveiligheidsraad, I just can't think of the English name now, but they got together and said, right, what are the different scenarios that can take place? And one of those scenarios would be an aircraft hijacked. It would be a boat being hijacked. And I mean, if you think of sea piracy, I mean, back in the 80s already, we were tracking sea piracies. What was the modus operandi? What was the weapons? There was a difference between the West Coast sea pirates and the ones on the Horn of Africa. We were on top of all of that stuff back in the 80s already. So we identified all of these scenarios. Then we said, right, remember at that point in time also there was a South African Airways aircraft that was hijacked. Fred Camille hijacked that aircraft. So we already had a South African Airways aircraft that was hijacked, and the result was that the police in that country shot the aircraft full of holes. That's how they dealt with it. That's the only way they could deal with it. So the government looked at different scenarios, and the generals of the different forces looked and said, but if there's an aircraft being hijacked, whose responsibility is it in terms of the law? And it was the South African Railway Police, because it was a transport section. We had the same powers and authorities as the South African Police. We just did not have holding cells, so we detained our people at the police stations. But the same powers and authorities. So we said, all right, if an aircraft is hijacked in South Africa, Railway Police. If an aircraft is hijacked to Angola, who deals with it then? And it was also the Railway Police, but we could not secure the airport and do the aircraft hijack, handle that. We couldn't do that. So we then, that responsibility was given to the special forces. So eventually we started to work with the special forces, and I'll give you some examples. Then we said, okay, if we have a boat hijack, if it's in the harbor, if it's lying just outside of the harbor, if it's in the open seas, how do we get onto that boat? Do we parachute onto the boat? Do we use the special forces, boats to get onto there? How do we get onto those boats? So that was the type of scenario. Then Policy Directive 1 of 1980 was signed off by the Parliament, which says, and it was signed by the Chief of the South African Defence Force, the Commissioner of the South African Police, and the Commissioner of the South African Railway Police. And very few people know this. I mean, very few people know that the Railway Police was deployed on the border, that our people died on the border, that you go to the Voortrekker Monument, you'll see the names there. Very few people know this. So what happened was, they had to go through a selection process. Who they're going to send and where are they going to send people for this training? Because it was non-existent in South Africa. But other countries had already started to work together. The Mogadishu thing, the GSG-9 from Germany and the SS worked together. That's where the first stun grenades started to come out, you know, in those situations. So we were then tasked by the Military Psychological Institute to go through a selection process. And I can remember to this day, it was Major Steve Rennickel. I can remember. So they put us through a selection process to determine which officers will be going to Israel and to Germany, to the GSG-9. And I was one of the officers selected. I was a lieutenant, as I said to you, in 1980. And it was around about June, we departed to Israel. Now, the guy that went with me was Captain Ali Jooste. When I was a student in the police college, he was my drill sergeant. So I was actually a student of his, but he was now a captain and I was a lieutenant. Now, the evening we had to depart to Israel on South African Airways, there was no seats available on that aircraft, except first class. I promise you, we traveled first class. Caviar, vodka, you name it. And when we hit the ground in Israel, boy, we were back onto the ground once again. We were deployed in their uniform, we did training there. And all of this special training, aircraft hijackings, building hijackings, monkey teams, what the South African police did, what the Defence Force did in South Africa, we did exactly the same training. No different, same instructors, same everything. So when we came back to South Africa, we actually started up then the Railway Police Special Task Force. And in the beginning, obviously, it was a new unit, so we had some of the generals and some of the brigadiers sort of overseeing that. And I was the first full-time commanding officer of the South African Railway Police. Later on, I was promoted to captain, and I spent several years getting the unit off of the ground, doing the budgets, getting the equipment. And at that point in time, we needed special equipment as well. So we used Arms Corps to get equipment into the country, specifically to do the aircraft hijacks, a special type of equipment, ladders and so on, bulletproof vest, communication systems, and so on. And obviously, we had to do this in conjunction with the Pilots Association of South African Airways. We had to work with the South African Police. We had to work with the hospitals. You know, if there's a huge injury, one mil at that stage had the biggest burn unit in the country. So we worked together. Obviously, there was some headbutting and, you know, this professionalism, this unit is better than that unit and so on. But when you spoke to the operators, the guys doing the work, the guys bleeding, the guys working and training on aircraft 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning so that the public can't see and didn't know what we were doing, those are the people that to this day have bonds together, work together, have a beer every now and again after many, many years. We still do that. And it's great. So we started up the unit, and it went very well. And what happened eventually is that I was then seconded to the Ciskei Police as a captain. And then my second in command at that stage was Johan Lotriet. He later on went across to National Intelligence. So a lot of our guys, some went to the police. Michael Engelbrecht actually went to the Reckies. And so on. We did work with the reconnaissance units as well. They know about it. It's documented in books and so on. So I went back to the Eastern Cape, where I actually came from as a captain. I was seconded to the Ciskei Police to train their task force. And like I've been doing up until, let me give you one nice little story what happened there. In the Hamburg area, we had a training area that was reserved. Nobody could go in there. And I had an office, which was a house on the beach, right on the beach. And I've actually done several explosive courses myself. I'm an explosive instructor and so on. But my good buddy Flip Skitter was at explosive headquarters. So I said, no, he needs to come down and do the course, that 6-week course. Then my buddy is with me. And part of the training obviously is diver training. So I had 2 Zodiacs, I had a Barbie, a rubber duck, and what I would do is arrange that we do the diving late in the afternoon. Then we just put on an overall over the wetsuit and we can go fishing. So Flip Skitter came down and we did the diving, obviously. We did all the training, and when it was finished, we launched a little bit out, and we had a police bin where we were going to put the fish in, and out we went. Now, Flip Skitter comes from Durban, so he catches with a different type of reel, and we're sitting on the rubber duck in the ocean, and he actually casts with you don't cast in the sea. You just drop the line. So he's sitting with this Skynes here, and he's trying to sort this thing out. And he puts the line in his mouth while he's trying to undo this Skynes here. And all of a sudden his head does this. And he grabs the line, and I'm not exaggerating. Afterwards his hand is going blue, and he's fighting this thing. And he pulls out a swart steenras. I'm telling you, about 30 kilograms. And he takes the pliers, takes the hook and the bait out of his mouth, throws it back into the sea, and a couple of seconds later, the same thing, and he pulls out another one, the same size. So we even talk about that to this day. I can tell you that on Friday last week, a couple of days ago, we had the instructors reunion at my house. And we get together once a month as instructors. After 40 years, we still get together. We have a pint together, and we talk, and we have fun, and we mention this once again. So my responsibility was then to train the Siskai task force. I was seconded there. I wore the uniform. And while I was there, I was nominated to do the majors course. And that was in the amalgamation, going over from the railway police to the South African police. So I had to come up to Pretoria. And as a matter of fact, we stayed in the mechanical school in Benoni for the first portion of the majors course. Then we went to Milieuscope. At that stage, I was now in the South African police. So I joined the South African police as a captain. I did my majors course in the South African police. And there was a portion they called the Klipgooiers cursus. We did that in Milieuscope. And I went then back to the Siskai as a major. And I was in several shooting incidents down in the Siskai. At that point in time, and 1 or 2 people in the Siskai police were actually killed. It's a story that I don't want to talk about, but it's a discussion that maybe at another place at another time. But I spent a lot of time and energy, and I think we did good work down there. And then what happened again? There was a threat against South African Airways. A threat of an aircraft being hijacked. I was then phoned by Lieutenant General André that being my speciality area, coming from Israel and so on. And he said he's deseconding me from the Siskai. I must come up, and I must come and take over the Sky Marshal unit. They started because of the pressure. And at that point in time, I think most of the people who had contacts in the police tried to be a Sky Marshal, because you're flying all over the world. And so when I got up to Pretoria and I saw this bunch there, I knew this is not going to work. So one of the first things that I did, I started my own psychological set of tests with the relevant authorities. I built an internal mock-up of an aircraft with aircraft seats. We could shoot live ammunition, we could put balloons as heads, and we could dim the lights, everything. And many of the people fell out, particularly those that, I wouldn't say had generals as family, but who had contacts as family. And I sent them back packing with broken noses and bleeding eyes and so on. And I'm not exaggerating, I'm telling you the truth. So we got the unit up and running. And then I found my contact in Israel, and we got the Israeli SCA marshals to come over. And we did a course again with the Israelis in South Africa, Sky Marshals. And at that point in time, every single aircraft of South African Airways had Sky Marshals on board. Now that's another thing. You can't take any firearm on board an aircraft with normal ammunition. So there's the CSIR was doing special ammunition for us, which when you are shooting an aircraft, it has various layers of skin. It will not penetrate more than 2 layers. So you will not have decompression. And what happened was we would put, depending on the route, up to four Sky Marshals on an aircraft, depending on the type of aircraft. If it was a double-decker aircraft like a 747, or if it's a local flight, most probably just one guy, depending on the threat. And now, obviously, you are armed. Some of the countries you could actually get off the aircraft and go book the firearm in. Some of them would lock them on the aircraft itself. But also, in terms of handling explosives on the aircraft, each aircraft, depending on if it's a wide-bodied or narrow-bodied aircraft, has got they call a least bomb location area, where if you can safely move the bomb, you would put it, pack it, remove the passengers, go down to under 14,000 feet. So if you have a decompression, the aircraft can still land, and so on and so on. So that's just obviously just in a nutshell. So we did that for many years. We only activated that when there was a specific threat. So what happened was, during that period, I was then promoted to Lieutenant Colonel. I still stayed there. And then it was decided that I must train some of the South African Police Special Task Force members as Sky Marshals. And what a pleasure it was to train guys like Marius Bartlett, who's in Iraq right now, and so on. And we did several courses. As a matter of fact, I've got a lot of those photographs I can actually share. We can put it on, where we did Sky Marshal training, where we did different scenarios, and so on. I'm also a trained hostage negotiator, and I can give you a lot of scenarios around about that as well. And maybe in a later interview or discussion, we can do that. Yes, and then eventually I went down to Graafrenet, to the police academy. I did my full colonel's course there in Graafrenet, and then I was transferred to the South African Police Air Wing in the college. I actually opened with Bill van der Merwe, Brigadier Bill van der Merwe, the police air wing in Polkol there in Pretoria. And what happened then, in just before 94, you had all of the police deployed at the airports. Like Johannesburg Airport or OR Tambo had 750 police officers. There were like 49 dogs, explosive dogs and so on, narcotic dogs at the airport. And with the general elections coming up in 94, they wanted to withdraw the police from the airports so they could deploy them for the elections. And I was seconded by the Commissioner of Police to sit on the committees to facilitate the withdrawal, and then also the deployment of private security of AXA, Airports Company South Africa. So I sat in all of those committees, and we did all of the planning, and the college at Ormonde near Gold Reef City was hired, the whole college. And we trained 650 private security guys to take over from the South African police just prior to the elections. And they were deployed just before the elections, and they needed then to appoint a head of aviation security, which was basically what I was doing previously at the airports. And I was headhunted actually by the airports company. I went through the interviews, and I was offered a job as head of aviation security at double my salary as a full colonel, with 23 years service at that point in time. I went and I spoke to the generals that I reported to, that actually deployed me to be on these committees and so on. They said, André, you have our blessings, because a lot of changes are going to take place with privatization and so on. So you have our blessings. So many policemen at that point in time was going off sick medically. I personally have a challenge with that. If you are not medically sick, if you are, of course, I don't have a problem with that. I refused to go off medically unfit. I resigned. On the 15th of December, I finished up. And on the 16th of December, on a holiday, I started with the airports company, so I didn't miss a beat. And we started the selection process for the recruits to take over from the South African police. So I was part of that as well. And I spent quite a lot of time, about 10 years there. And then I finished up there. I went up into Africa, did my own business. I've worked in many countries in Africa, and that's where I actually met Chris, was up in Nigeria. And I met a couple of guys there, like Ben de Klerk, which at a later stage I'll tell you, I met him again at the Dogs of War, and with the COVID pandemic and so on, he actually passed away. But maybe one of the most important things where I am today is the following. As a full colonel, I came back from an overseas trip. And my wife said to me, we've been invited to a church. Now, I had all the legitimate reasons in the world not to go to this church service, because I've just come back from overseas, jet lag and all of that stuff, I'm tired, and so on. And I might add the following. At that point in time, I was doing all the right things, being a senior officer and so on. I served on the church boards, and I was an elder in the church and all of it. Now I'm invited to church, and I'm looking for excuses not to go to this other church. But suffice it to say, we went to the church, and I walked into this church. It was a strange church. Nobody was wearing suits. Tea and coffee was being served, and everybody was talking to each other, and there was a band on the stage. I thought, yes, I'm going to need to get out of this place. I don't feel very comfortable. And I sat through the service, and at the end of the service, I need to get out of this church as quickly as possible. I was like, well, maiden, I've got to get out of this place. So I got into my car and I drove away. Now, later that afternoon, I get a phone call. Say, you invited to the evening service as well. I said, what? Going to church twice on a Sunday? That seems a little bit far-fetched, Even now, I can even more say I'm tired and I don't want to go. I'm so glad I attended that evening service. It changed my life forever. You need to understand what I'm going to say to you now. Maybe it seems far-fetched to you, but I went to church that evening. Although there were about 1,000 people in that church, it felt to me as if the pastor, Derek Stone, he's gone on to heaven now, Derek Stone, it felt as he was preaching to me and to me alone. Now I can promise you, as an officer, I've always got a belt on, and I've always got a handkerchief in my pocket. I hardly ever use my handkerchief. I'll use toilet paper, because with my handkerchief I can do tourniquet, I can do first aid with it, and a host of other things. That specific evening, he did an altar call. Now, I didn't know what the altar call was. But to this day, I'm telling you that I don't know what happened. But when the altar call was done, as a full colonel, as an elder in the church, something or somebody picked me up out of my chair. I ran down the aisle, knocking people back into their chairs, getting to the front of the church to give my life to the Lord. As an elder in the church. I was religious and did not have a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. I did not. So, I was down on my hands and knees. All my dignity gone. And I was crying like a baby before the Lord. I say again, as the staff task force, self-defense, whoever, I'm crying before my Lord and my Savior. Snot en trane. And you know what? I didn't even have a handkerchief. And I gave my life to the Lord that evening. And then I started my internal pastors training, IGI University in Texas. I qualified as a pastor. And I was in full-time ministry for about 18 months. And I felt the Lord say to me, I must go back into the corporate world and become a king. It's not time yet to be a priest. So I did that. I was obedient. But let me tell you how this happened. One night in the church, it was a Sunday evening, my wife is standing next to me. During the praise and worship, I hear a voice telling me, you must resign. At this point in time, I had left the police and I'm now working with the airports company in South Africa as an executive. I hear a voice as clearly as you are hearing my voice now. You must resign. I say to the Lord, Lord, I'm a man under authority. I understand commands, and I have people under me who understand when I give orders to them. I have never in my life doubted you, but tonight I need confirmation that this that I'm hearing is from you. I need confirmation. It's serious. At that point in time in South Africa, it was very difficult to get work, specifically if you're a white Afrikaans-speaking man. It was difficult to get work. So after the service, I said to my wife, Estelle, I've experienced something in the service. She said to me, no, but she did experience something as well. So I said, what did you experience? She said, no, you go first. I said to her, oh no, this is serious. What did you experience? She said to me, the Lord said you must resign. There's the confirmation I was looking for. That Sunday evening I went home. In obedience, I wrote out my resignation and I handed it in the next day and I gave 6 weeks notice. That's when I went full-time into ministry for 18 months and then I went back into the corporate world again. In the corporate world, did very successful, did a lot of consultancy work up into Africa, worked for international companies as a director up in Nigeria. As I said, that's where I met Koos and Ben and so on. And later years, I met Ben again. And at that point in time, I'd become chaplain for the Dogs of War, which you will see in one of the videos, I think, with Reg Walkerley, who's the National Master Chief. And Ben was the Master Chief at that stage in Pretoria. He actually took over by me. I started the Dogs of War in Pretoria. And Ben got COVID. I spoke to him in hospital the Monday. The Wednesday he passed away, and the weekend I buried him. And Willem, he was in church. I was leading the service in church on the Sunday. The next day, Monday, he was dead. I buried him the weekend. And so I can carry on and on. So I know I'm in the Lord's perfect will at this point in time in my life. I know that which the Lord wants me to do, I'm doing. And I know this what we are doing now is with a plan and a purpose. What it is, I don't know. But I know the prompting of the Holy Spirit. I know that the Lord has a plan and a purpose. Yeah, I've met Koos now for the first time in 13 years. I met him up in Nigeria. I'm meeting him now. I met Koos up in, Ben de Klerk up in Nigeria. I met him here. So it's all coming together. And I firmly believe that this message and the messages that are going to follow is going to take you to a place that can assist some of you. For argument's sake, I have a book, and we'll talk more about that later. While I was in Ghana, I went to Kenya, and sitting alone in my hotel room one evening, the Holy Spirit said to me, I must write a book. I've never written a book in my life. It was a daunting task. I've written the book. It's published. It's called, Who Do You Think You Are? André E Olivier. There's a lot of André Oliviers. So go and Google it on YouTube. André E Olivier. You'll find the book. You'll see what it's about. It's basically my testimony. But I also have a YouTube channel. Now you can once again go to YouTube and Google André E Olivier. There are sermons on PTSD. There are sermons on all of the basic things of the Bible, and it's specifically for veterans. I don't care whether you're in London or in New York or in Amsterdam or in Zurich, Switzerland. It's if you are a person looking for answers in the Bible, practical stuff, not dogma, practical stuff. I invite you to go to YouTube, André E Olivier, and you go and look at some of those sermons. And I'm sure Koos would look at the possibility of putting a hyperlink in so you can get to those sermons and my contact details. If you need any assistance or you just want to share your experiences with me, I'd love to hear that. So in essence, that is how I started my police career. That is how I ended my police career. And now the wonderful thing is this. I still have not retired. I am currently the managing director of a company called OTT Solutions. It's a SAMVA-owned company. What does SAMVA stand for? South African National Military Veterans Association. It is a statutory body that falls under the Ministry of Defence and Military Veterans. I'm the managing director of that company. The chairman is retired Lieutenant General Gilbert Romano, the previous Chief of the Army. The other director is Brigadier General Fiedler, an old PAC Appler man. And then the other director is Anton van Rensburg. He is a retired major, and myself a retired colonel. And we basically refurbish armored vehicles. We did a couple of projects for Denel, for Arms Corps, for the South African Police, for the Metro Police in Cape Town, for the Metro Police up in Tshwane, and on an ongoing basis. But in the group, we have OTT Technologies that design and build armored vehicles for the United Nations that are deployed in Mali, that are deployed in Somalia. The Kenya Defence Force uses the vehicles down in Kismayo in the southern point of Somalia. There's a factory in America. So even to this day, I'm still involved with veterans. It's in my blood. And then with the Dogs of War, which is a motorcycle association based in Tempe, in Bloemfontein, but we have chapters all over the country. I'm a chaplain there, so we reach out to our buddies. We do wheelchairs and walking rings and food where we can. We don't publicize this stuff, but we do it, and the people know that we do it. We have another outreach coming up on the 16th of June. We're doing that in Rooiberg, which is past Warmbad, Mombella, out towards Tabazimbi way. We're going to have the different chapters from Pretoria and Limpopo with all the Dogs of War coming together. I'm going to do the word. We're going to take some clothing and food along. We're going to give it to the community because the majority of old people are all veterans. Most of them served in the South African Defence Force in one format or another, or in the police, or the railway police, or the prison service. It doesn't matter. So this we'll be doing on an ongoing basis. Yes, I ride a motorbike, and it's a Harley Davidson, and I love it. It's a heritage. But maybe I must give you the story. How did I get to this Harley? I've been riding motorbikes since I've been 16 years old. On and off, on and off, on and off. But in this very room that I'm sitting now, I was having my quiet time. This is my prayer room, off my bedroom. I was sitting in this room alone one night, and I just felt I must lie on this carpet that's here. I just laid on the carpet before the Lord. And I heard the Lord asking me this question, André, what do you want? I said to him, Lord, I've got everything. You've blessed me with health. You've blessed me with children, with grandchildren. You've blessed me with everything. I don't need anything. And I heard the Lord saying to me, what would you like? I said, Lord, and Dominiquis, I've always wanted a Harley Davidson. And he said to me, go and buy one. I said, Lord, I'm not a youngster anymore. I got up out of my room. My wife was sitting in the TV room. I opened up my laptop, and I don't normally do this at night. it's family time. And I started to search. My wife asked me, what are you doing? I said, I'm buying a Harley Davidson. She said, what? I said, I'm buying a Harley Davidson. So while I was having a look for Harley Davidsons, many of them you send in an email to do an inquiry. But one of those, the picture of the Harley Davidson came up. Now, if somebody had to ask me, what would your perfect Harley Davidson be? It was that one. It was red and white. It is a soft-tail heritage. Beautiful. It's what I wanted. There's the picture. So now I sent about 10 different emails out saying, please contact me. I'm interested in buying the Harley Davidson. The first phone call I got the next morning was from Boksburg. And the guy said, I received your email. You interested in Harley Davidson? I said, yes. I said, which Harley Davidson? He said, it's the Heritage Softer. You won't believe it. There's a guy who worked with me, Zas Lombard. He also drives motorbike. He worked at the reconnaissance unit up in Palabora. We got into his car. I drove to Boksburg. I saw the motorbike, the Harley. I bought the Harley. I left the shop with the Harley. I lent a helmet to get the bike back home. And my wife supported me. So, driving the motorbike around, one of the ex-policemen who was also a soldier, Johan Heineke, actually saw me driving the motorbike. He said, but don't you want to join the Dogs of War? So I said, yeah, sure. And that's how I joined the Dogs of War. So you can see, in this brotherhood of ours, looking out for each other, talking to each other, opening doors for each other, it just all fits together if you allow this to happen. If you think you're better than somebody else or you're an introvert, it's to your detriment. You really need to get out there. I'm a member of so many associations. Our Task Force Association, the Railway Police Task Force Association, which stopped in 1986. We get together on a monthly basis. I'm the patron of that association. As a matter of fact, once a year we get together nationally. I'm involved with SAMVA. I'm involved with the Dogs of War because it's in my blood. So, Chris, for this opportunity, I thank you so much. And I hope that, this discussion is adding value and it people can also get a little bit of an insight into what the railway police did. And maybe we can get into some more of this at a later stage because, we operated on the border. We had a security branch. We had dog units. We had everything. We had a water wing. We did basically what any police force would do in the world. And it's a little known fact. As a matter of fact, if I see the vandalism that's taking place now on all of the stations and railway lines and how it's impacting negatively on the economy, even the ANC is now saying bring back the railway police because it's a focused, smaller unit which is more specific to support the infrastructure of the country. One of the less known units of the railway police was people that actually checked taxis and trucks that they had the correct permits to operate in the correct areas. And as a matter of fact, if you see all of the trucks on the road now, it's damaging the infrastructure. Because the Department of Transport in those years issued the permits. You couldn't just get into a truck and drive. They would say, you can only drive this route or this radius, and they forced you to use the trains to keep the traffic to a minimum on the roads. So, maybe it would be a good idea to bring back the railway police. That could be focused and to help to get this economy back on its tracks. Because we need to create jobs for veterans children, and to uplift this economy. So thank you once again, Koos, for this opportunity. It was great.
I can tell you a story about the railway police. Of course, in those days, we were already back in the South African police. And we need to get the history straight here, because I'm not sure, and we'll have an episode or two on the railway police itself. They used to be part of the South African police, I believe, and then they moved over. And then they came back again on the parade where I was. And I found them to be excellently equipped. They had Uzis, which I admired. I really wanted to use one, and I got one from them. They were very kind. But those were also the days in the middle 80s where people were stoning with trains. And there's an old joke, of course, that you should never be at the back of a train because locomotive driver, I'm not sure what you call it in English, he would show them signs. And then they would start stoning the guys in the back. So one day I was invited between King Williamstown and East London, and also to Queenstown on the railway to protect the train. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I'm going to sit here in first class and with a shotgun, and if there's some problem, I'll just shoot through the windows like the cowboys and crooks in the old days, But, Colonel, I have to tell you, they made me sit right in the front of a locomotive, right there, right underneath a damn light. The light is here above your head, and there you sat. And it wasn't only just extremely cold, there were all the bugs and the things were falling on your head. And I thought to myself, this is a one-track minded thing. If I see a train approaching from ahead, I'm jumping. I'm not going to wait. And I started speaking to a railway policeman, and I said to me, can you imagine how it feels to search a ship? Do I even realize how big is a ship, how dark that ship is inside, and that somebody can waylay you, take you there without people even knowing about it. So it took a tremendous amount of guts. So we're going to talk about the railway police. I really like the uniform on the border as well. I had this stripe type of uniform. It looks like browns with dark patches on it. Perhaps you have a picture for me of it. They look good. They did very well. You were involved. You were too shy to say it here, but you were involved in quite a few of the things. We're going to talk about that, and especially also about your time as a pastor. Because I can testify here. When I first met the colonel in Nigeria, there were a whole bunch of us there, and all of us served, all of us were either military or police. Many of them came out of the elite units, like the task force, and I recall having church services on Sundays. And we would come together, a group of men, and we would sit in a circle. Colonel André was normally leading it while he was still there. He would do a church service, we would sitting there, I would look at Martin Venter, 3-2 Battalion. He would be there, and I would look at him, and he would look at me, and we'd look at each other. I never felt closer to God, in Africa anyway, than in those groups. I want to thank you, sir. You really changed my life there. I was looking at it. At that stage, I was a bit of a loner. And I want to say to you people also, and I don't normally talk this long, but during my time in South Africa, I've done 2 parades, and I've spoken to the dogs of war. I've met these people. That's how I got back to Colonel André. And I want to say this to you. Don't stay at home and seclude yourself from the rest of the world like I did for many years. It's not going to help you. It's not the right thing to do. Yes. Go out and speak to your mates who will understand you. Go to the parades. Go to the motorbike gang. It's nice to drive a bike, even Harley Davidson, really, sir. But anyway, we will joke about that further. My wife actually has a Harley Davidson, so we won't talk too much about that either. But don't let Satan get you into a position where you think you're worthless, nobody wants to speak to you, nobody are interested in you. Come and speak to us, not only legacies, also people like Colonel Olivier. Is there anything else? Is there anything else you can tell us, sir? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, what you actually said now, Koos, is extremely important. You see, the enemy always wants to get you alone. If you go and have a look, for argument's sake, how a pride of lions hunt, whether it's in the Serengeti or the Kruger Park, or that, it doesn't matter. They will also look for the weak or the lame, and they will attack that one. And it's very much the same with us. You need the brethren. You need support. And if you isolate yourself, you are really looking for trouble. And I'm telling you now, there's a lot of people that are there to reach out and to assist. And there's no thing such as being ashamed. Where we are, we talk about LHR, loyalty, honor, and respect. And if you go to, for argument's sake, my website, there's specific sermons on PTSD. There's 2 episodes, episode 1 and episode 2. Episode 1 will tell you what is PTSD, that you can understand it. Why it's normal to experience this. But remember, it's not just us that were on the border and experienced death amongst us. People that go through farm attacks, farm murders, are also experiencing PTSD today. And it's been identified as such. And there's a lot of place where you can get assistance today. There are ex-soldiers, ex-policemen that are now psychologists and psychiatrists. And even in the church, there are people that can assist. Our church recently did a course with Professor Kusser from Potch on this type of thing. How do you deal with this stuff? And you can't deal with it unless you start somewhere. You can drink as much as you want to, you can sleep as much as you want to. It's not going to help you. You need to understand, what are you fighting? Who's your enemy? Remember the old 8 memoir that you used to carry? Ken je vyand, wapens? Who is your enemy? What are you fighting? Once you understand that, then you can deal with it. And I know there are people out there that are still hurting. Look, let's be honest. In the old day, if you were in a contact or you went over a landmine, you would go to the pub, you would have a couple of drinks, and that was it. That was your therapy, over and done with. But unfortunately, it worked for some, but it did not work for a lot of other people. So there is help out there, and I'm asking you to make contact with the necessary people, and there is assistance for you. And we'd love to be able to be part of you, part of your journey to win this thing. It's a battle that can and must be won. And I can give you testimony upon testimony. We've already done this. So come on, I'm inviting you. Get out there and get amongst the brethren.